Good day, lovely people. This is Professor Matt for the Too Many Guys Soccer Show, and it is Saturday, the 8th of June, which means we are less than a week away from the kickoff of the European Championships, and I can't wait. Uh, my plan today is pretty simple. We are going to record a Euros preview episode sometime this week and look at the tournament in its totality. But being the Eastern European correspondent on the show, I figured I would record a separate episode where I dive a little bit deeper into all of the teams from that region. And indeed, there are a lot of Eastern European teams in this tournament. So, and for some of us, we're not that familiar with some of these teams, some of these players. So I figured I'd do a deep dive. So let's get this started, shall we? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go group by group, talk a little bit about each individual team, talk a little bit about strengths and weaknesses, right? A little bit about tactics, uh, give you the team's star man, right? Their star player, their most important player, and a player who I think is going to be a potential breakout. And then I'll give my prediction about how far I think any of these teams can go. And right, obviously these aren't the favorites. Although I'll keep it real, I think there are two legitimate, maybe three dark horse teams, and at least one or two teams that are probably going to do a lot better than people assume. So let's get started with Group A. And the only Eastern European team in Group A is Hungary, who are in their third straight Euros, which is pretty impressive, right? Because I mean, we all know the myth, the legend of the magical Magyars of the 50s. But for most of my existence on this planet, Hungary was hot garbage, right? They were this national team that we knew used to be good, really good, way back when in the distant past. But they were terrible. So the fact that this is their third European championship it's fairly impressive, and their performances have been fairly impressive, right? In 2016, they were one of the surprise packages, right? They got out of a group that included Portugal, an Austrian team that I think everybody, including myself, pinned as dark horses, but they underachieved. And right, the real surprise package of that tournament, Iceland. They got slapped up by Belgium in the round of 16, but that's kind of where that team probably they overachieved, right? That's about as far as they realistically could have gone. Uh 2020, they finished fourth, but they finished fourth in a group of death, right? That was the group that had France, Portugal, and Germany. And if you recall, other than getting, pistol whipped by Portugal in the first match, they drew France, right? And they very nearly sunk Germany's ship, right? Last minute heroics from Leon Goretzka literally saved Germany's tournament, right? Because otherwise they were going home. Uh, so their record recently, and when I say recently, I mean 2020, since 2022, is pretty goddamn impressive. 13 wins, seven draws, only three losses. And amongst those matches were two victories against England, right? One of the co-favorites of this tournament, 1-0 in Budapest, 4-0 at Wembley, which, look, that doesn't happen very often. And a 1-0 victory against Germany. Now, granted, that was dysfunctional Hansi Flick Germany. Right. And they'll see the Germans right in the second match of this group, right? That the group includes the host nation, Germany, Switzerland, and, Celtic Camps, Scotland. With it, I really like this Hungarian team. Before, right, because over the last 6 months, my opinion of this German squad has kind of changed and evolved, as indeed they have. I had Hungary primed to win this group. Actually, they are a really, really good team. And like I said, I think they're one of the legitimate dark horses to make a fairly deep run in this tournament. Right. And it all starts with the manager, Marco Rossi, who was hired in 2018. Right. Got them to the last Euros, came damn close to getting them to the World Cup. Uh, right. And Rossi has instilled a mentality, right, about this team, kind of never surrender sort of attitude. And look, he's done what every good international manager, in my opinion, should do. You see what you have, the talent that you're working with, and then you build a system around that talent. And so the Hungarians have, two things going, well, three things going for them. They have ballers. More about that in a second. Uh, they have continuity, and this is going to be an ongoing theme in this video, by the way. Continuity, continuity, continuity. The manager's been there since 2018. He he's these guys have a lot of them have come up under him, and right, they play a system, and right, it's usually when they're defending, it's a 3-4-2-1. When they're in possession, it's a 3-2-1-4, right? uh so it's sort of flexible, but defense first. And again, considering he's an Italian, that makes a lot of sense. Uh, so I'm pretty high on this Hungarian team, and right, in terms of individual talent, the star man. Look, it's my boy. It's Dominic Szoboszlai. Magyar is a really tricky language. He had an up and down season for Liverpool this year, right? The first 3 months of the season, he was our best player. Let's be real, he was. Then he got the injury, and he never really picked up form again. And right, part of it too was I think Klopp was trying to mold him. His versatility is one of his strengths, but I think Klopp was trying to mold him into, I don't know, the Magyar Gini Wijnaldum. And look, he can do that. He can play the eight. But in my opinion, and I think Arne Slot's going to use him differently next year, especially if we are moving to a 4-2-3-1. I think he's more of a natural attacking midfielder, or a guy that you can play either left or right wing in, uh, 3-man frontline midfield. And he's incredibly versatile. He's clutch. He's got a shot on him. He's a dead ball specialist. And right, with the Hungarians, he's the captain, which is kind of crazy considering how young he is. Uh, but he's given much more of a free role. And so I think, God willing, if he's over his injuries, you're going to see a better version of Dominic Szoboszlai at this tournament. And again, hopefully for Liverpool next year under Arne Slot. Uh, is he the most important player? You can make a case for that, but I'm gonna spin it a bit differently. I'm gonna say Willie Orban. And right, this is kind of cool. Willie Orban, ethnic Hungarian, but born in Germany. So he's playing this tournament in his homeland. RB Leipzig center back. Look, Orban is the glue that holds this stout defensive unit together. There's some other good defenders, one which I'll talk about in a minute, but he is the on the field general, the grizzled sort of veteran, and he, I Hungary can go as far as their defense and their system takes them. Right, they do have some difference makers up top, but really, this team is built around defense first. Uh, so in terms of an important player or most important player, I'm going to say Willie Orban. And then in terms of a breakout, how about Milos Kerkez from Bournemouth, left back or left wing back, left wide, midfielder in this system. 20 years old, really, really impressive season in the Premier League this year. And right, he's part of this generation that Rossi has blooded in. And Szoboszlai is the crown jewel of this, but this guy's pretty goddamn good. And I feel that even though he had a really good season for Bournemouth, who I think overachieved in the Prem this year, I think he's really gone under the radar. So, keep an eye out for him. In terms of prediction, well, like I said, I'm high on Hungary. I think they're a dark horse team. And I think if everything goes right for them, they potentially could wind up in the semifinal. Do I think they're going to get that far? Probably not. I had them winning the group about 6 months ago. I have now changed my opinion on that. I think the Germans do top the group, but I think Hungary finishes second and finishes second comfortably. And in terms of how far they can get, I'm going to say quarterfinals minimum, right? In terms of the brackets that I keep doing, they inevitably meet England in the quarters. And while they've beaten England twice and once handedly, the 4-0, there's an asterisk there. That was an England experimental team. That was a B team. Can I see Hungary beating England? Yeah, there is a universe where that exists. But, if it put a gun to my head, I would say, England in the close one. So I'm going to say second place in the group, quarterfinal. Moving on to Group B, and there's two Eastern European teams here. So let's get to the first one, which is, I think, for a lot of people, kind of an unknown commodity. Albania, making their second ever major international tournament. They were debutantes in 2016, kind of held their own in a tough group that included France, Switzerland, and a half decent Romanian team. Right. I know all about these guys, not because I really follow Albanian football, or for that matter, Italian football. More about that in a second. But because they were in the same qualifying group as Poland. Poland. They were impressive. Really, really impressive. They were great in qualifying, won the group outright. They're here on merit, guys. And right, they beat Poland. Granted, it was at the time very dysfunctional Poland, but they beat Poland 2-0 in Warsaw. And they beat the Czechs 3-0 in Tirana. Since the turn of the calendar year, their form has kind of been up and down. 0-0 draw to Chile, a 1-0 loss to a bad Sweden team. Right, but then they beat Liechtenstein 3-0 in their, one of their tune-up friendlies this past week. Now, what does that really say? Because it's Liechtenstein. So what I'm getting at is I'm not totally certain which Albania is going to show up. And yeah, they won the group, but you know, the Czech Republic was dealing with issues, and Poland's a mess during qualification. So, how good is this team really? So the manager is Brazilian, Slavinho, and right, he's been in charge for about a year and a half now, and he prefers a 4-2-3-1 setup, but they've also played a lot of 4-3-3-3, 4-3-3 against teams where they think they can have more of the ball. Uh, the names may seem unfamiliar to a lot of us, but if you look at this squad, they've got some players, man. And a lot of these guys, like they're not playing domestically for like Dinamo Torino or Partizani. They're playing in Italy, right? Because, Italy and Albania have an interesting relationship. Let's just say that. Right. So, a lot of Albanian labor, feeds, Italy's industry and manufacturing. And indeed, Albanian labor fills the Serie A. And I'll be honest, if you're an Italy fan, which I am, right, because my grandmother's maiden name was Orlandini after, I am sort of provisionally I'd be worried that first match because Albania plays Italy on the first match day in the group. I'm a little concerned because it would be very Italy of Italy to, let's say, come in overconfident. But these guys know who you are. Like they're intimately familiar with you. They play against your best players week in and week out. So if I'm Italy and if I'm Croatia, right, this is incredible. This is the first time that Croatia and Albania have ever played each other competitively, or actually not even competitive. There's not even friendlies. Even in the old Yugoslavia, right? Yugoslavia and Albania had their own little Cold War going on, right? So they never played each other. And somehow over the last 30 years, these two teams have never met. So, there's there's a possibility that Albania are going to play spoilers in what is a group of death, right? Spain, Italy, Croatia, the Albanians. Who is their star man? It's tough because there really isn't a star man. If I had to pick one, I would say Elashid Hayasi, the fullback, now turned left-sided center back uh, at Lazio. And I know this guy simply because it seems like every summer he's linked with Liverpool. So like I've made a point to actually be like, well, who the hell is this guy? He's a really, really good player and kind of like Willy Orban for the Hungarians. He's the glue that ties the defense together. He's the leader on the pitch. In terms of importance, this Albanian team, kind of like Hungary, it's defense first, right? The defense is solid. The midfield is designed not so much to create, but to stymie attacks. They're kind of built to win low scoring games, which is why, the results in qualifying were so impressive. If there's a identifiable weakness, it's up top. They don't really have goal scorers. And so someone's going to have to score the goals. And I think, just based on sheer talent, that guy is going to be, Chelsea striker, the forgotten Chelsea striker, Armando Broja. He's still only 22. He seems like he's been there forever. But they poached him when he was mad young. Uh, he was great during his loan spell with Southampton. Not so much this past year. Now, injuries had a lot to do with that. If he can just provide one or two moments of brilliance and, be clinical in front of goal, I think Albania is going to be in business. But if he doesn't, and I don't know who, their other strikers are kind of mystery men to me, it's going to be tough. In terms of a breakout, this is easy actually, and I was thoroughly impressed with this guy during qualification. He pretty much ran Poland off the pitch. It's Christian Aslani, 22-year-old playmaking, deep lying playmaking midfielder from Inter Milan. He is super talented, and he had a pretty good season for Inter. Wasn't always a nailed on starter, but he got in there. Uh, he's good, guys. He's good. And in Albania's system, he's the playmaker in that double pivot, right? He can break up play, but really he's more of a field. He's a quarterback on the field. He can distribute. He can go forward. He makes good runs. Like his footballing IQ is way ahead of his age, and right, he's been playing at a fairly competitive level for a number of years now. And he's a guy I don't think people talk about, but I think they might after this tournament. Prediction. I've been kind of talking Albania up. And look, I don't want to get too carried away with these guys. I think they're going to finish fourth. I do. I can see them. I mean, if my God, can you imagine if they finish third over Italy? But I can't imagine that. Because I think this group is too tough. If these guys were in Group E or Group F, ooh, yeah, they could easily be a third place team. I don't think I don't think they can do that in this group. That being said, they're not going to go home with 0 points. I I think they take points from somebody. If I had to bet on it, I'd say Italy because of the familiarity. Maybe Croatia. This is going to be a weird group because I think everyone's going to beat up upon one another. But I think the Albanians, they finish fourth, but I think at the end of the day, they can go home with their heads held high because I don't think they're going to just get, curb stomped. I think all three of these matches, I think are going to be close. And I do think they're going to pull a surprise in at least one of them. Moving on to the other Eastern European participant in Group B, Croatia. Uh, you'd probably think that I would have them in that Hungary dark horse, conversation. And if they got to a semifinal or a final, I wouldn't be shocked. Nobody would, right? They have, if not the best, because I think there's an argument there, right? Because my boy Cisse at Senegal, uh, they have the best or one of the best, 1B, I don't know how you want to spin it, international managers, uh, in the world today in Zlatko Dalic. Never doubt Zlatko Dalic and never doubt the mentality of this team because they are, Balkan mentality monsters. And look, they're still super talented. You look at this defense with the likes of Garvial. I know he's aging, but even my boy, former Dynamo Kiev man, DiMaggio Vito, looks like, goon from a Bond film from the 80s, right? With the ponytail. And right, the midfield speaks for itself. This is a very talented team, and this is a team that I don't want to necessarily take lightly, right? But it's weird. If you look at Croatia's history in this tournament, and then you look at their history in the World Cup, it's weird. Like World Cup Croatia is freaking good. Euro Croatia is just kind of, eh. They've qualified for this tournament 6 times, yet they've never played a fifth match. 1996, they got to the quarters, but remember, that was the old format. 2004, they got grouped. 2008, they were excellent in the group stage, but then they only got as far as the quarters. Remember, they lost that crazy match to Turkey. 2012 group stage, where they also were in the same group as Spain and Italy. 2016 round of 16, they played that crazy match against Spain, but it was too little, too late. And oh, excuse me, that was 2020 round of 16. That was the match against Spain. 2016, they also made it to the round of 16, but they lost. So it's weird with this Croatian team, and there are question marks. As talented as they are, there are legit question marks. Uh, the first and most obvious is the age, right? This team has ballers, but a lot of these guys, this easily could be their last dance. Right, including the midfield, right? I mean, Modric and Brozovic are like one step away from the retirement. I know Modric is like some sort of vampire or something. He's looked the fucking same since he was a kid at Dinamo Zagreb. But he is getting up there in age. The only guy in that midfield who's like quote unquote in his prime is Kovacic. And I'll be honest, I think he's declining as well. He had a kind of stop and go sort of season at City. Uh, the other concern I have is who's gonna score the goals, right? Because when they still had Mandzukic up top, this team was scary. Now it's like, okay, you don't really have a striker. Uh, what is Ivan Perisic? Is he even really a forward anymore? It's it. There are. I have some concerns. Starman, that's obvious. It's Luka Modric. Until he indeed leaves, he is the guy. Important player. I'm cheating here. I'm gonna give you three: Kramaric, Budimir, Petkovic. Who the hell's going to step up and score goals? Because if Croatia can get a consistent threat in front of goal, this team can make a deep run. In fact, in some ways they're probably the most equipped team that I'm going to be talking about in this video that could win the whole thing. But man, is that an unexpiring crew. Kramaric is ancient. He had a good end of the season in the Bundesliga, but the guy's just not consistent. Budimir's a freaking tree pole. He scored a lot of goals this season at club level, but we know who this guy is. And then look, Petkovic came alive at the end of the season for Dinamo Zagreb when he had to. But, there's still questions about how fully healthy he is. They don't have that talisman striker. Player to watch out for. How about Joseph Stanisic? Right, we talk about Leverkusen and how good they were, but he was kind of the forgotten man. Came over on loan from Bayern Munich. It'll be very interesting to see if he goes back to Bayern. Uh, I've been thoroughly impressed with him. Whether he's been starting or as a part-time player, can play both right back, left wing back, right wing back. He's a Swiss army. He's a Croatian army knife. And right, I think he's kind of gone under the radar. So he's going to be important, right? Because I think Croatia's defense is going to be good. And right, again, we think about the defense with Marvial. He's going to be a big part of that. Prediction. This is going to sound crazy because there is a universe where Croatia can win this tournament, but I have them going around in the round of 16. I think they finish second in the group, maybe third, right? Depends on Italy. Right. But I I think the average age of the squad, the lack of a killer in front of goal, and the depth, like there are more unknowns than knowns about this particular Croatian squad. And so I think it's round of 16. I don't think they're going to get that fifth match in this tournament. Now I could be totally wrong, and it feels yucky saying this because I shouldn't doubt Zlatko Dalic. I've stopped doubting, but I really see this team as around a 16 kind of team, especially depending on who they wind up in the knockouts. They'll get out of the group. I think they'll finish second. I don't think they're going to make a deep run. I think Euros Croatia and World Cup Croatia are just two separate things. But again, I could be wrong. And Zlatko Dalic has made a habit of proving me wrong over the last 6 or 7 years. Moving on to Group C, and this is another group with two Eastern European teams. Let's start off with Serbia. So Serbia, I figured it out. Serbia is to UEFA what Jamaica is to CONCACAF, right? Because you look at this squad, and especially you look at the players they have up front. Mitrovic, Vlahovic, Tadic. They got guys who can put the ball in the back. And the midfield is still pretty good, right? You have Milinkovic Savic, etc. Then you look at the defense, and there there is no defense. This defense is balls. Right. And we were having a conversation about this, because they play England in the first match, off air in the group chat. And I was like, look, I don't think England's gonna lose to this team. But I can easily see that match ending 5-4, 4-3 or something. Uh Serbia have bad boys up top. The defense is tragically terrible. Gone are the days of Branislav Ivanovic, Neven Saputic, Mike Spoyd, Vrebic. Right, this defense is bad. And remember, during the World Cup, where I was pretty high on them, I had them finishing second in that group. They lost to Brazil, and they actually played. The defense actually played pretty decent in that match. Weirdly enough, they went up 3-0 against Cameroon and wound up drawing that match. And then, right, they allowed the Swiss to put up a four-piece. And it's not just that, it's also recent results. They got four-pieced by Russia. That's right, they played Russia in a friendly. Now, granted, this was Serbia's was sort of a hybrid A team, B team. But the Russian national team, as it is constituted now in the era of exile, these are kids and old ass men. Like, all the Russian players in their prime, definitely the guys who are playing abroad, they don't get called. They refuse call ups now. What's the point? Right. So they got jacked up by a Russian team. And that's concerning. That is really concerning to me. And the challenge for the manager, who is a guy who I loved watching, Dragan Stojkovic, is how do you fix this leaky defense? Because it's terrible. It's terrible. They qualified directly out of the group. They finished second. But that was a rather weak group, and they were a distant second to Hungary, right? It's going to be interesting. And I have a strange feeling that all of their matches are going to be these crazy high scoring affairs. Uh, who's the star man? Well, I think it's Dusan Vlahovic. His politics are asshat. They suck. Uh, Chetnik, man. But dude scores freaking goals. And right, he's going to have to, because the only way they get out of this group is that they just outscore opponents. Uh, Most important player. Look, the defense is terrible. So someone's going to have to prevent 5, 6 goals. And that guy has to be Djordje Petrovic, the goalkeeper from Chelsea, Chelsea Mike's boy. Uh, he's going to have to be special if Serbia is going to advance because, look, he's not getting any help. Breakout player. How about Lazar Samdarovic, attacking midfielder, 22-year-old from Udinese? I didn't watch a lot of their matches in qualifying, but the ones that I did, he stuck out. And right, he's a dude who's just really kind of scratching the surface. And, if he has a good tournament, maybe he's going to get a big move. We'll see. What's my prediction for Serbia? And you watch, I'm going to look like an idiot. I was high on these guys, super high on these guys at the World Cup. I was like, they're going to finish in second place, round of 16, maybe quarters. And they crapped the bed, right? They fumbled the bag. They spilt the gumbo. I have them finishing fourth in this group. Right. England, if England doesn't finish first, there are problems. I don't trust Denmark, but I trust Serbia's defense or lack thereof even less. And we'll talk about that other team in the group in a second. Uh, Watch, they'll finish second. Vlahovic will be the golden boot leader after the group stages, etc. But I don't know. I have no faith in this team. But again, maybe post hype sleeper kind of team. But I think they're going to finish fourth. Uh, the other Eastern European team, one that people aren't really talking about, but the one that if England's going to slip up, I think they slip up against these guys. Slovenia, their first Euro since the year 2000, where they were in the same group as well then Yugoslavia, but effectively Serbia, Montenegro. And they played that crazy match fourth. Ended, I believe it ended 3-3. One of the best matches or the most crazy matches in that whole tournament. And right, this is their first major tournament appearance since 2010. So this is new for them, right? They're not debutantes, but they might as well be, or at least this crew is. The thing is, they were extremely convincing in what was a rather difficult qualifying group. Right, or well, I should say a very evenly matched qualifying group because right, it was them, Denmark, who they're gonna see again. Kazakhstan, we've talked about in the pod, they're better. And Finland aren't trash anymore, guys. They're pretty decent. Uh their record since the beginning of 2023 is also impressive. 7 wins, 2 draws, 3 losses. And the manager, again, in a way, a good way to think about Slovenia is think about them sort of like Hungary, except maybe, a couple steps behind in terms of the project. They've had a manager, Matthias Kirk, since 2012. Excuse me, 2012, 2018. So he's been able to build the system, right? And he's really brought in and bedded in a lot of these young players. So, Slovenia plays, systems football, which if you're a smallish, maybe not the most talented team internationally, is, how you punch above your weight. And I have a I'm kind of high on these guys. The Starmen, and I'm so glad that they qualified for his sake. It's still Jan Oblak. Is he the best goalkeeper in the world as of today? No, I don't think he's that guy anymore. That being said, he's at worst top three or top five, right? He's still one of the five best goalkeepers in the world today. And right, I'm just glad that he has a chance to represent his country in a major international tournament because I genuinely was starting to think, man, this guy's just never going to, get to a tournament. Most important player, and again, another Udinese guy, kind of goes under the radar. It's Sandy Lavoric. Uh he's the DM, and right, this Slovenian team is built on counterattacking football. So his role is incredibly important. He's the guy that puts out fires. And right, the Slovenia is willing to concede possession. And I think they are for most of their matches in this group, maybe Serbia being the difference. They're probably going to have less possession. But this is the guy he's the fireman. He puts out fires, and he's got a little bit more to his game. His distribution's really good, etc. But the guy who I want to talk about, my breakout, and I'm hearing stuff that like he's potentially going to wind up at Arsenal, which Arsenal fans you should celebrate, because I want him at Liverpool. My man Benjamin Sesko, 21-year-old striker from RB Leipzig. He's he has 13 senior international caps. He has scored 11 goals. Guys, I'm going to repeat that. In 13 international caps, he has scored 11 goals. This guy is super clinical. He gives me Diego Jota vibes. Right. And he also scored 18 goals for RB Leipzig in his first season, came over from Salzburg, that Salzburg Leipzig energy drink pipeline. Scored 18 goals in all comps. This kid is just scratching the surface. And I think if you weren't aware of him before this tournament, you're going to be aware of him after. Where do I think Slovenia can finish? I think they're finishing in second place in this group. I don't think, even though I think they can be England's banana peel, I don't think they're going to finish ahead of England. Uh, but my trust levels of this team are actually higher than Denmark. And look, Denmark may have more recognizable names. Slovenia knows these guys. They were in the same qualification group. It's not a mystery. So I think they finished second. I think they're going to be one of the sort of like surprises of the tournament. And, I do have them going out in the round of 16. But if you're Slovenia, you have to be happy with that. That in and of itself is a victory, not just, finishing second, but getting out of the group. So watch out for Slovenia. I think they're actually going to be one of the surprise teams. Moving on to Group D. It's only one Eastern European team, and it's Poland. First thing I have in my notes is we be screwed. And look, part of that is we got through the qualification playoff, where our reward was to be grouped with one of the co-favorites in France, a really talented, but I think flawed Dutch team, and an Austrian team that, surprised at the last Euros. And I think they could be borderline sort of dark horsey, like, an Austrian team that shouldn't be taken lightly. And meanwhile, you have Poland that really is in the midst of a generational transition. The kind of it's hard to call them a golden generation, but I'm going to use that term that came up in the late odds, but really in the early 2000 teens. This is their last dance. Lewandowski, Chesney, like this is probably this. I'd be shocked if this isn't their last tournament, right? So, and this is a Polish team in full on transition. It's kind of a, and I'll say this, it's kind of a minor miracle that we're even at this tournament, right? Because the Polish FA did something remarkably stupid. They and I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know what they were watching, especially the last couple major international tournaments. They decided to hire after the World Cup, where I think we slightly overachieved, Fernando Santos. What were they thinking? I mean, it made more sense than Steven Gerrard, which that made those rumors make no sense. Uh, other than the fact that he managed Matty Cash briefly, that made no sense. But Santos, man, fuck Santos. We when the qualifying group draw happened, I was I was pretty optimistic. I'm like, okay, the Czechs are tough. Albania is probably better than you think they are. Indeed, they were. But we should win this, right? Because we had, Andorra, Moldova, freaking Faroe Islands. What does Santos? I remember this is when I lost it. It was on the group chat. It was during qualification, and we're playing the Faroe Islands. Faroe Islands, by the way, guys, is effectively a Scandinavian pub team, right? You shouldn't be scared of Olaf, the auto mechanic, and Sven Gorn, the pediatrician, who go play football on the weekends. You shouldn't. This is where you need to unleash the dogs. You need to score 5, 6, 7 goals, get the vibes going, get the positive energy going. What did Santos do? Played a low block. Like we ultimately won that match 1-0. But like by the 65th minute when it was 0-0, I'm like, why are we playing for a draw against this team? And that explained a lot. That explained why we wound up in the qualification playoff and didn't qualify automatically. Santos, the foreign wrecker, Santos, the saboteur. We finally came to our senses, sent him packing, and hired Michael Prebosz, who's former manager at Liga Warszawa. Under Prebosz, we've been better. We're not playing high octane attacking football, but that would be suicidal. We do not have the players to do so. That being said, you shouldn't be just playing low block defensive football just to play low block defensive football. So we've moved to a 3-5-2 formation, right? Counterattacking football. And look, here's the deal. This team's strength is the goalkeeper. I know Byron Robb would vehemently disagree with me, but Chesney doesn't suck. He's flawed, but he doesn't suck. And look, the defense, I think defense is going to be all right, right? Because the three center backs are going to be Benderek, he is who he is. He's not great, but he's solid. Davidovich, uh, and Kivor, who I think is silly underrated. Arsenal fans know what I'm talking about. This dude's good. Uh, and then right wing backs, Frankowski and Zahowski. Matty Cash will not be there, injury, but and that's a problem because right, the depth would have been nice or having him as an option. But I think the back five and the goalkeeper are going to be okay. The midfield and the strike force, we'll get to that. But since we switched managers, we look better, guys. I mean, we did not sit back in the low block against Estonia in the first qualification playoff, and we, smacked them up 5-1. Easily could have been like 8 or 9-0. In fact, the one goal that Estonia scored was, an own goal. Uh, And right, we held our own against Wales and Cardiff and, got the penalties. And yesterday, and I still don't know what I watched this. I don't know what to make of this. We beat Ukraine 3-1. Now, granted, we were outplayed for, geez, 75 minutes of that match. But, those 15 minutes when we, had some control, we look good and we look clinical. But can we count on that? I don't think so. Right? Because there's some issues. Right, because defensively, I think we're going to be sound. The midfield is okay, but the thing is, it's just okay. It's not particularly creative. It's there to stymie and to put out fires, not to, create. This is going to be a lot of one route football. And granted, we have a guy who on his day can still wreck a game. The problem is those days are not he doesn't he does not have his day with the regularity. Lewandowski is declining. There's no way around that. In fact, I see Saudi Arabia or maybe MLS, right? You can go to Chicago. It's like going home. Chicago is Poland's third largest voting district. You just go to Chicago and eat Wumpke and shit and vibe. Uh I see one of those two scenarios in his not too distant future. But being the player that he is, and this is, you can say this about a lot of great players who are declining. I'm sure we said the same thing about Ronaldo when we talk about Portugal on the larger preview. He's still capable of those moments of magic. And with the way this team is set up, maybe you only need one moment of magic and we're okay. But that's living dangerous. And the thing is, and this has been Poland's issue literally since the criminally underrated Jakub Blaszczykowski called it a career in 2018. Who the is the Robin to his Batman? Right. We thought it could be Piotr Zelensky. And look, I'm a big fan of his, but he is who he is. He's not that guy. He's a good little player. He's not that guy. I have no idea what happened to Sebastian Szymanski. 4 or 5 years ago, I was talking this guy up as the truth. Now, all of a sudden, he's 28 years old and his career seems to have hit an impasse. Arkadiusz Milik can't stay healthy. Krzysztof Piatek had that one weird, season where he's scoring goals for fun, and now he's just a joke guy. Uh, right? It's who Lewandowski can't do it by himself. And I think that's going to be this team's fatal flaw. Starman, it's easy. It's Lewandowski. Is he Poland's greatest ever player? I think there's an argument for that, but those teams in the 70s and the 80s, they had bowlers too. Uh this is probably gonna be his. I'd be shocked if this isn't his last international tournament. And I think at the end of the day, it's just sit back and enjoy this because this is the end of something that was really quite special. About that in a second. Most important player. It's the Warsaw Wall. It's Chesney. One of the reasons we were able to get out of the group stage in Qatar 2 years ago was because he played out of his mind. Now, does he have a mistake in him? Always. He is that guy. But he's better than Byron. What Byron Rob's anti-Chesney agenda. He's better than that. He's a very good goalkeeper. He's one of those guys that has those. He's flawed. He's going to have to come up big in this tournament if we have any chance of getting out of this group. Because if bad Chesney shows up, it's gonna be tough. Breakout. Nikola Zalewski, excuse me, 22-year-old, jack of all trades, right? Play full, like in a pinch, he can play center back, but he's a left-sided wing back, left midfielder, etc. from Roma. Really, really impressed with this kid, and I think he's one of the bright lights, young Polish players that are starting to creep into the squad. Because, like I said before, I think this is a team in transition, and he's going to be a key part of this generation, this new generation that's going forward. So watch out for Nikola Zawalski. Right. So, what's my prediction? The weekend drooped. Like, come on. I think we're gonna finish. I think every match is going to be close, even against France. Well, the fact that we're playing France in the last match bothers me. Maybe this team can, pull something off against, again, a Dutch team that is talented but flawed. And, Austria, we don't know which Austria's going to show up. Maybe they can pull a draw and make it interesting, but I can't see this team getting out of this group. Right. And the reason for that is, look, this is the generational shift. This is the end of this era of Polish football. And if you're a Poland fan like me, after the group stages are over and we're out, I don't know, go to a resort town on the Baltic coast, get yourself some vodka, some pivo, some cabanossi, some Krakow style ham, etc., and just vibe out. Like, because first of all, the fact that we got here when Fernando Santos tried everything in his power to not get us here, we should be happy just with that. And really, we should be happy and we should take into account the achievements of this generation. Yeah, could they have done more? Yeah, I had them losing to, I think I had them losing to France in the quarterfinals in 2016. We really should have beaten that Portuguese team, but everybody in that tournament should have beaten that Portuguese team, and they did. So, right. But look, for most of my lifetime, rooting for the Polish national team, the 90s, the aughts, they were fucking bad times. They were trash. We were bad teams that would sometimes get to tournaments and then get blitzed by the damn Germans. But from 2012 to now, and particularly from 2016 to now, where we haven't missed a major tournament. You know, this has been remarkably consistent. And right, we should take stock in the memories that this generation has brought us because look, the Polish national team is terrible, terrible for years. And now, if we don't at least make it to a major tournament, that's disappointing. And those are the standards that this generation has brought us. And these are the standards that we have to at least aim to maintain. Get into qualify for major tournaments. But yeah, I can't see us making out of it. Group E, and this group has three teams from the region. Right, Belgium and an Eastern European trifecta. I'll talk about Belgium, I'm sure, at length during our preview. I am not high on that, but that's a story for a different episode. Let's get started with Slovakia, right? And look, they were pretty decent in qualification. They qualified, directly from the groups. And right, they have a half decent history at this tournament, right? 2016, they got to the round of 16. Uh, Played Germany tough for a good chunk of that match. That the score line flatters Germany. That match didn't get out of hand until the last 20 minutes. And then they didn't get past the groups the last go around, but they made things difficult. And that's the thing with Slovakia. They're always going to make things difficult. It is weird though that this is their first ever international tournament since independence without Marek Hamšík, which is kind of insane because he's ancient, but yet he was the catalyst for Slovak football in the face of independent Slovak football. This is going to be a fairly solid team. They're not going to be an easy out by any means because on the positive side of things, the defense, right, and their center back combo is great. Skinra and David Honchko, in the center. Look, they're not going to concede that many goals, and their midfield are by and large solid. The questions are up front and with the manager. The manager, Francesco Carzona, he's kind of just a guy. And right, he was doing double duty at the end of the season because he was like Napoli's third manager this season. And look, Napoli was terrible. Uh, I don't know what to make of this guy. Maybe it was, he was doing two things at once and he couldn't focus on that. Like, it's not easy to do double duty with a club and a national. It doesn't work in modern football, even if it's just on an interim basis. But like Napoli, and look, maybe they had already given up, but they were garbage under this guy. And the other question is, okay, so you won't concede many goals? I have no idea where the goals are coming from. Right. I looked at the squad yesterday and I was shocked to see the name Robert Mack. Robert Mack, I don't know whether he was on the 2010 team that beat Italy, but I think he was. Look, he hasn't been relevant since he was at Zenit St. Petersburg back in like 2017, 2018. I forgot he existed until I saw his name, and I was like, nah, it can't be the same guy, right? Uh Robert Boniak, who's the striker, he's talented. He's been a name that I've kept hearing for a couple of years now. And he's still relatively young. I think he's 22, but he's really kind of underperformed. He's kind of sort of underwhelming. And yeah, I mean, I'm hard pressed to see where the goals are coming from. So Starman, I think this is easy. It's Skinner. Uh, is he declining? It's tough to tell. I hit injury filled it last 2 years, and he really hasn't kicked on at PSG, but it's also PSG. So, uh, but he's easily their most recognizable guy. They're going to go as far as him in that defense uh gets them there. But the most important player is a guy who had a horrible club season, but again, everyone had a horrible club season there. Napoli, Stanislav Lobotka. Uh, Look, this is he's the put out the fire guy, and right, he's more of a modern defensive midfielder. He's not an old school. He's capable of being an old school destroyer, but his game is way more progressive. I really like him, but his club form this year was terrible. He has to be that guy for Slovakia's midfield, right? Because I think defense is going to be okay. Up front, we don't know. He's going to have to, lock down that midfield. And again, put out fires because they're probably going to concede possession, at least to two, if not all three of the other teams in this group. And breakout guy, how about Leo Sauer? Left-sided forward, 18-year-old from Feyenoord. And this is a guy I didn't know he existed until about 3 weeks ago because, and I don't know whether it's lazy journalism or, there's something to this. A certain Feyenoord manager is now my team's manager. And all of a sudden, this guy's name keeps getting brought up as a potential transfer target. Uh, the fact that as an 18-year-old and really as a 17-year-old, he broke in last year. Uh, the fact that this guy has been a regular contributor for what is a large club, at least in context of the Eredivisie, uh, is pretty impressive. And, he seems like a talented kid. Uh, he's definitely a mystery guy, though, to me, and I imagine for most of our viewers. So, like, if there's going to be a breakout guy, it's probably going to be him. And, like, I feel that a Slovak breakout player is going to have to be one of their forwards because the established guys, I just don't see it doing it. Somebody's got to score goals, and someone has to, provide. And maybe this guy's that guy. I don't know. Prediction. I struggle with this because I could see them finishing third. I also can see them finishing fourth. It wouldn't shock me if, you know, uh, either way. I hate to say it, I think they're probably not going to. I have them finishing fourth and group stage exit. I think there's some good things about this team, but the warts are too gross and pussy for me to suggest that they're gonna, make it out the groups. Romania. And this is cool, right? Because I came of age watching this sport in the 90s. And in the 90s, those Romanian teams, Hagi, Dan Petrescu, etc., those teams owned. They were freaking fun. I loved those teams. Right. But really, since the year 2000, Romanian football has been trashed. The domestic league is just a shit show. And right, there hasn't been, that kind of like I was suggesting about Poland, celebrate what we did with this last group because you don't know when this will happen again. That Romanian golden generation, they were fun, they were great. It, they haven't had anything remotely like that. They've made a couple international tournaments in the interim, but they've been group stage fodder. Let's be real. And this is their first tournament, not just Euros, but just tournament period since 2016, where they, exited the group stage in France. Don't really know much about the manager, Edward Udanesco. He's been the manager since 2012, excuse me, 2021. He's managed pretty much everywhere domestically. Right. But the results under this guy have been pretty impressive. They were undefeated in qualification. Did they win many matches? No, they were the draw kings. But they've been pretty good. He has them playing a 4-2-3-1 formation. And right, their record since 2023 is 4 wins, not all that impressive. 6 draws, only 1 loss. And kind of like Slovakia, they're eerily similar in some ways. They're going to keep matches close. They're going to be tough to break down. Uh, in terms of a star man, how about Tottenham's Dragusin? Young central defender, really a prototype kind of modern center back. And right, considering the way this team is set up, look, they're going to ride and die by their defense, and he is their best defender. He is the linchpin in that back four. Most important player, and one of, I think, only 2 guys that were on that 2016 team. So for in a lot of ways, they're not debutantes, but they might as well be debutantes. Central midfielder and captain Nikolai Stanachku. He's playing in Saudi Arabia these days, and he's 31. But he is their heart and soul. He is their leader. And look, in this 4-2-3-1 system, he is very much the deep lying. He's the destroyer of the two. He's going to cover the defense, and he's done a pretty good job of that. He did a pretty good job of that in qualifying. And like I said, this team I think is going to go as far as the defense takes them. He's that link between the back line and the midfield. Breakout. I had some real issues kind of identifying a guy. And this is going to be weird because this guy's 25 and he has a very famous name. How about Enes Hagi? Right? Spawn of Hagi. A couple of years ago, he came up in Italy with Fiorentina. Obviously, famous last name. He looked good in, Italy. And then he was on that Steven Gerrard Rangers team. And for 6 months, he balled. I was like, wow, this guy potentially, could be, one of the better young players in Europe. He then got hurt, and his career has just gone freaking sideways. He's never really recaptured that form. I was shocked to realize I didn't know where he was playing until I looked at the squad. But look, they're gonna need some sort of dynamic player in that front line because the starting striker Puskás, not that Puskás, another Puskás, man from Transylvania. He's kind of a Christmas tree. He's one of those like big, but like he doesn't do anything special. Someone's gonna have to create, and someone's going to have to also maybe score goals that they create themselves. Haji seems like he's the logical candidate to do that. Is he going to ball out? I don't know. But I loved his father, and look, I'm rooting for him. Prediction: I have them finishing third. Right? I think they can beat Slovakia. Uh, right? Because as much as I'm not impressed with their, attack, I am more impressed or more faith in their attack than I do Slovakia's. Although that match easily could end 0-0 like that. Part of me says that has like 0-0 or 1-1 written all over it. But I think both teams know that they have to beat the other if they have any hope of getting out of this group. I've been finishing in third, although again, it wouldn't shock me if they finished in fourth. I don't think they get out of the group though. And part of that is because, 3 points probably should be good enough to get you one of those fourth place, one of those 4 3 place spots. But I have to wonder about their goal difference because the other two teams of this group, I think they're clear levels in this group. I think two teams are pretty good and two teams are. Let's talk about one of those other two teams. Ukraine. Now in their fourth straight Euros. And the cool thing about this is you see progress. They qualified automatically in 2012. They got grouped, but they were in the group of death, right? England, France, and Ibrahimovic, Sweden. They they got 3 points. They probably should have got four because England they got hosed against England. I still remember that. I still remember being pissed off about that. But right, group stage exit. Right. 2016, they face planted. They were terrible. Really, really talented squad, but the manager and the tactics were all wrong. And look, that was a pretty tough group too. Germany, Poland, a very good Poland team, and a tricky Northern Ireland. But then, 2020, they got out of the quarters. And, I said 4 years ago, this is arguably the most talented, definitely the most talented midfield independent Ukraine has ever had. I'm going to take it a step further now and say, look, this is the most talented and easily the deepest Ukrainian squad ever, right? Because Ukrainian teams that in the 90s and in the aughts that were entertaining, but only really made it to one tournament, they had star men, Rebrov, Shevchenko, Nazarenko, Olakusev, uh, Timashuk, but those teams weren't deep. If one or two of those guys got hurt, effed. This team, this team's different. And it's a wonderful mixture of some, established veterans and really, really talented younger players. So, and, every position, it's weird. For years, rooting for the Ukrainian national team, you kind of had an idea of what your starting 11 always was going to be, or optimal starting 11. I don't know that anymore, right? I think Lunyon should be the starting goalkeeper, but if Trebin is named the starter, especially because of Lunyon's injury, I'm not disappointed. I think we have three guys who can play right back, right? I'm not. It's going to be really interesting to see because this is a deep, deep squad. The manager, right, and a lot of that progress happened under Andrei Shevchenko. Big shout out to Sheva. I think he took them as far as he could, and his old partner in crime, his strike partner, Sergei Rebrov, former Dynamo Kiev manager, has taken over. It's not continuity like Hungary or Slovenia, where we've had the same manager since 2018, but there is continuity in so much that the style and the tactics are rather similar. Shevchenko preached possession football. If anything, Rebrov is more centered around, possession based football. And all he really did was tweak it. Under Shevchenko, we played 4-3-3 or 3-4-3. Under Rebrov, we mainly played 4-2-3-1. Occasionally, we'll go to a back three, but that's usually if we have a lead. Uh, right. And if anything, he's accentuated what Shevchenko had already put in place. We had to qualify through the playoff, and that was a little nervy, right? More about that in a second. But no harm in that because we held our own in a group that included England and Italy, right? And we took points over Italy twice. So no harm in getting out of the qualification playoffs. However, the qualification playoffs did raise a couple questions. And part of this is almost by design. I'll talk about this in a second. Rooting for Ukraine and rooting for Liverpool might be the same thing. Because what did Ukraine do in all two qualifiers against inferior opposition? We conceded the first goal and we made it just harder on ourselves. Now, we came back and won, much like Liverpool did most of the time, not all of the time this past season. But guys, that's living dangerously. You can't do that. And part of it is, I feel like it almost takes us, the opposition scoring, for us to really wake up and get a sense of urgency because I like Rebroff. I think actually he probably, if not after this tournament, whenever he cycles out, he's a guy who Western European clubs, not like big clubs, but mid-table Premier or Bundesliga squads should really think about, okay, maybe, this is a guy. I think he's a really good manager. But if I have a criticism, he's in love with possession sometimes to a fault. And the logic is, it makes sense. It's kind of Pep Guardiola logic. If you have more possession, you will eventually score more goals, and by doing so, you will win. But sometimes it's possession just for possession's sake. And I feel I saw this with Dynamo Kiev, and I've seen it with the Ukrainian national team. Sometimes the possession is lackadaisical. Sometimes the possession is pointless. And like there's a lack of urgency. And that's something that, potentially could derail us. Starman, Artem Jovic. I mentioned him in, I think, my, Eastern European club recap, season recap. Yo, this guy led La Liga in goals. Like he was a goal scoring machine. And like I said, I like he's a Slavic homeless guy, Harry Kane. And he's only 25, guys. And he's I if Ukraine does what I think they do, I think he is a dark horse to win the Golden Boot. He is super clinical. I love his hold up play. And the thing about him, even before he was scoring goals for fun, the dude scored clutch goals. He scores, it's not just he scores a bunch of goals, he scores important goals. So I think, look, Yarmolenko's still on this team. He's going to be a super sub. He's not going to start, guys. Jovic is going to now take the mantle of, the face of Ukraine. He's our new talisman. He's been that big number nine, which we've really been waiting for since Andrei Shevchenko. Most important player, and I know Arsenal fans are going to laugh at me. It's actually Alexander Zinchenko. Uh, Zinchenko did not have a great year for Arsenal. Part of that was because that whole freaking inverted thing that then Klopp copied from Arteta. Like everyone's figured that the frick out. You can't, like, that's not a thing anymore. Stop it. The other thing is, and look, Pep Guardiola deserves mad credit. Zinchenko has been playing club ball for the last 5 years out of position. He's not a goddamn left back, guys. I've said this. He's not a left back. He is a box to box midfielder, and that is his best position. And you see when he puts on that Ukraine kit, he's a different guy. He's also the captain. He is, and he's been the captain through diversity, adversity that goes beyond. And he is the leader of this team. And look, his footballing IQ, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it was just, hey, tactically, other teams in the Premier League figured out that whole inverted thing. And, I don't think you're getting the best out of him playing left back. I just don't. Either, make him a full time left back like Pep sort of did, or put him into the midfield and don't bother with this stupid, inverted thing. Uh, right. He's he's Ukraine's most important player, and he's that deep lying playmaker in the double pivot next to rock solid destroyer man Taras Stepanenko. So, he's going to play a pretty crucial role. Breakout guy. I also mentioned him in that last Eastern Europe, that Eastern European recap. Uh, Jorge Sudakov, 21-year-old attacking midfielder from Shakhtar. This kid is truth. Right. There's obvious comparisons between him and Modric. Look, Modric is super talented. I like Modric. I said I thought Modric probably should have stayed in, the UPL for a year or two because he wasn't a finished product. He really wasn't refined. Sudakov is leagues and bounds ahead of him in terms of his development. And shout out to Coach G. When Italy played Ukraine in the final group stage match, Coach G was even like, who is this guy you have as your attacking midfielder because he's causing problems? And I'm like, yeah, it's Sudakov. He causes problems. That's his job. I really think he's got a freaking tournament. And right, Jovic, even though he can create for himself, he is kind of reliant upon supply. This is the supply man, right? And not just for Jovic, also for the other, wide attacking mids, Tashankov and we assume Modric. Sudakov's going to be critical. And right, I think he is going to get moved this summer because I think he's going to have a really good tournament. Why do I think he's going to have a really good tournament? Well, I said I think there's two dark horses, maybe three, Croatia being that. If World Cup Croatia shows up, okay. Ukraine's my other dark horse. I have them winning this group. Granted, that a lot of that has more to do with my feelings about Belgium, but I trust Rebrov over Tedesco. I trust this Ukrainian squad over a Belgian golden generation in full on decline. I think they win the group. I may be crazy person, but I think they're going to win the group. And yeah, like Hungary, quarters minimum. If things go absolutely right, maybe they can get to the semifinal. I don't think go any farther than that. This is a really good team. This is going to be a very exciting team. But I'm gonna hedge my bets. I'm gonna say win the group, quarters, maybe semifinals, but quarters. And then finally moving on to Group F, where we have two Eastern European. First is the Czech Republic, which talk about a team with history, right? If we're including Czechoslovakia, look, they won the damn thing in 1976. They got to the final in 1996, and look, they've made some deep runs in this tournament over the years, including in 2020 where they got to the quarters. And look, they were a tough out. They're going to be solid. We know this, but they're not going to be spectacular. New manager, Ivan Hasek, who prefers a 3-4-2-1 system, counterattack, which if you look at their talent kind of makes sense. They're not a team that's going to hold on to the ball. Uh right. They had an up and down qualifying campaign, but a lot of that was because they had a lot of guys that were hurt. Sofal missed time. Right. Sushek missed time. Patrick Schick pretty much was hurt during the entire qualification process. So there's a bit of an asterisk there, but they were able to finish second behind Albania, qualified automatically. Right. And look, the core of that team that made that run 4 years ago is coming back. There's experience here, right? The manager's kind of new, but the core of this team is experienced and they're healthy. Starman, well, it's easy. It's Patrick Schick. And right, he only really came back and came into form the second half of the season. But, we know how good he is. Dude scores goals. Most important player, it's probably Sushek. Right. I don't think he's as good as he was a couple years ago, but he's still the, general of that midfield. He ties everything together. Uh, Breakout. When we think about the Czechs, we think about Leverkusen. Obviously, we think about Patrick Schick. But how about another guy from Leverkusen who kind of went under the radar, but had a pretty good season? Adam Hojlak, 21-year-old, really versatile striker. He can play, as a, starting striker. He can play as a, second striker, a false nine, can play out left, can play out right. Uh, Really, really versatile and fun little young player. And right, somebody other than Czech's going to have to score the goals. I think it's probably going to be him. And I wouldn't be shocked if in this 3-4-2-1 formation, he is the right sided of those two attacking mids that are going to operate, behind Patrick Schick. So watch out for him. Prediction. I think second place. I think in a group that has Portugal that you think are, the favorites, although I'm not so high on them as I once was. Georgia, more about them in a second, who may make their maiden appearance. And a Turkish team that I think's on fraud watch. I think second place is reasonable. And I'd say round of 16. I don't know if they can make another run like they did 4 years ago. Maybe if they get lucky, they can get in the quarters. Look, they're going to be solid. The Czechs are going to be solid. And finally, the Georgians. And right, those of you who haven't, please check out my sort of historically themed video talking about the history of Georgian football from the Soviet era into the present day. Uh, in my notes, I just have a simple question. Can they be Iceland? Right? Can they be this tournament's Iceland? In a way, it's fucked up. Poland, they got through the qualification playoffs, and their reward was here's France, the Netherlands, and Austria. Georgia also qualified through the playoff, through the C bracket, not the A bracket. And their reward was a group which I have to be honest is kind of it's navigatable. Yeah, okay, Portugal looks good, but Portugal in recent tournaments has been, they sometimes play down to the competition. The Czechs are good, but they're not spectacular. And again, Turkey, I think Turkey is the hardest team to predict in this tournament. Georgia has been making steady progress since the late 2000s, right? And particularly under the new manager, ex France, Bayern Munich man, Willie Sagnol, they've really sort of taken off. They play a 3-4-3 formation, right? It's defense first, but when they are in possession, they're tough. They have flair players and they have bowlers scattered all through the team. They've got guys up front. I mean, obviously, Kvaratskhelia. I think they have the most criminally underrated goalkeeper in this tournament, and I think in Europe, in Mardashvili, the goalkeeper from Valencia. And the thing about these guys are, not only do they have these really talented players scattered throughout the squad, they're all by and large under the age of 25. The only two like old heads are Buddha Zavishvili and old ass man Kasha, who used to play in MLS. That's it. Like those are the only old guys. This is a super talented and really young team. Who's the star man? Well, that's obvious. I think it's Kvaratskhelia. And look, he's had a Georgian Jesus. He's had a down season. But again, and I've mentioned this about other players before, how much of that is on them and how much of that is the dysfunction that was not? Because last year he balled the frick out. And I think I the scary thing about him is he's still developing. Uh this could be a tournament where he really stamps his authority on things. And if Georgia can somehow get out of this group, which I don't think is out of the realm of possibility, this just enhances his profile, enhances his price tag. Because look, I think he's going to be playing in either Spain or England in the next year or so. I do. Most important player, I'm going to say Marmoushvili. He has come up with critical saves for them. Particularly during that final qualification match against Greece. Like I said, I think he's the most underrated, disrespected, good keeper in this tournament and maybe in Europe. So, he's going to be critical. Breakout candidate. This was tough because there's some guys like Zurab Davishvili, who I've been aware of for a number of years because he broke out in the RPL as like a 16-year-old, who's just kind of scratching the surface. He made his move to France. Took him a while to, seize a starting role, but he's clicking, he's getting it. But he's probably not going to start. He's going to be, an impact sub. Uh, so my breakout candidate is Georgios Mikadadzes, 23-year-old striker, also plays in France with Metz. And look, he's only been in the national team for like 2 years. Guy's got 9 goals, and he scored 13 goals in the league. So a guy of note, a guy definitely under a lot of people's radar, probably not even aware of. Remember the name Georgios Mikatadze. Prediction. I have them finishing third. I have them finishing over Turkey. Now, could I see Turkey maybe finishing in front of them? Yeah, Turkey has some interesting young players. This is kind of effectively a home tournament for them with the giant Turkish diaspora in Germany. But I mean, geez, there's something about this Turkish team that doesn't sit well with me. I mean, Ozan Kabak is going to be one of their starting center backs. Let that sink in. Kabak, he was a center back. Kabak, he's going to be critical for them. And look, we know Kabak. I look, he wasn't terrible for Liverpool, but my memory of Kabak is that I think it was Champions League match against RB Leipzig, and he had come up for a corner and he had to dash back. And anyone who's ever seen the second Terminator, the scene where John Connor's on his bike and the bad Terminator, he's doing this. That was Kabak, but everything was all like slow and limbered, and it was like it seemed really difficult for Kabak. He's slow as shit, and I look, I drank the Turkish Kool-Aid 4 years ago, and I got burned. I like an idiot. So, heard it all before. Uh, we'll see. I think Georgia finishes third. I don't have them advancing. I think they're one of the third place teams, kind of like Romania, that unfortunately are out at the group stage, which look would be a mess. Just getting here is a massive achievement for the Georgians. But I would not be shocked if they wind up in the round of 16, which I think is as far as they realistically can go because this is the beginning of their journey. Right. So that is it. Wow. Well, we dived. We in the words of Jurgen Klopp, we went deep. We're digging deep with all these Eastern European squads. I can't wait for the tournament to start, guys. Even though I think Poland's going to be abject rancid trash, but I guess Ukraine is going to make up for that for me. Right, and Germany and Italy love. Uh, but right, I can't wait for the start of this tournament. And look, I may be Nostradamus here, even though he's kind of too, I guess, right? Right, people reading too much into things. But or I might look like an idiot. I might look like a clown. I could be the professor, I could be the student. We don't know. And that's the great thing about this. But I'm looking forward to this. And right, be interesting continuing this discussion and looking at how some of these Eastern European teams do because I think a few of them are going to make noise. But anyway, this is Professor Matt, and this is the Too Many Guys Soccer Show. Like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and enjoy the Euros, guys. And we'll see you on the other side. Peace.